Hi, this video will talk about the new features of 2020 R1 of variant isCOBOL. The biggest change is the addition of code coverage and unit testing. When you're testing a program, you want to be sure that every line in it is tested. Running with the code coverage switch will tell you just how much of your code is getting executed and how much is missed. Just add -coverage to your command line. It's a great tool to help you fine-tune your test processes. To test a unit of code, we've also added unit testing. At certain points of your program, you know what value a variable is supposed to hold. Unit testing means that you can test that specific unit by putting assert statements in your code. We'll look at this closer in a few minutes during the demo. The new positional clause moves items not by variable names, as move corresponding does, but by the position in the order of the items in the group. For example, G1 name in this structure will move to the G2 name, even though they're different sizes. To increase our compatibility with other COBOL dialects, you can now use a $ symbol in front of a function instead of the word function. Our database bridge product can now save tables as temporary. They'll be kept in memory instead of stored permanently. This will increase performance in cases where it fits. Also, if your database is Oracle 18c, we've added the ability to differentiate between global and private temporary tables. In the IDE, we've added customized code folding. Now, we've always had code folding for the program sections, but now you can customize your own section of code to fold up. And you can see in the screenshot here that I have one folded. The calculate the size of the cell is folded up so that I can see the retrieve list selection color better. Also, the code coverage and unit testing that I talked about earlier are integrated in the IDE. The debugger. Previously, if you wanted to debug more than one client at a time in thin client mode, you had to specify the default port on the command line and make sure that you didn't use the one that someone else was using. You'd also be debugging an application running in the same memory space as the non-debug sessions. As of 2020 R1, each thin client session started with a -D will be isolated in a separate memory process, and each debugger connection will be assigned a unique port number transparently. You can configure the port numbers to use, as we did here with as.debug port_range, or use the default value, which is 9999 to 10099. The scroll pane is a new control, and it goes with a new property, scroll group. A scroll pane is a container that holds controls, often more than one screen's worth, and it has a scroll bar on the right side. You assign each control in the container to a scroll group, similar to a radio button group. And when the user tabs between the controls, the view inside the container will scroll up and down so that the control that has the focus can be seen. No more tabbing right off the screen. This is a great feature for applications that run on the smaller screen sizes. The tree view control has been around for a long time, and it's one of the standard controls that's so useful that we're constantly updating it. Now, it's common now to see columns of data in the tree view items, and this is what the table view property does. That's new in 2020 R1. Another one of those standard controls that's constantly changing is the grid. And we've added some things to our grid in 2020 R1. Now that the user can set a filter to filter out rows of the grid, there's a new inquire property called rows filtered to find out which rows are currently visible, if there are even any filters on the grid. You can now select all the rows in the grid programmatically, and you can force the search panel to be visible all the time, rather than just when the user activates it. You can change the color of the row and column headings that has the current focus. This helps the user orient themselves in the grid. Message box colors and fonts can be configured now using configuration variables in your properties file. The Notify Mouse style is supported on all controls now. You would use this style to capture events when the mouse enters, exits, clicks, and double-clicks on a control. EIS now stands for Extend Internet System, a more descriptive name for EIS. WebDirect, a part of EIS that helps you map COBOL screen sections to HTML equivalents, has grid control and layout manager enhancements in 2020 R1. The web client can run desktop applications in the web browser, and in 2020 R1, a keyboard button or a screen double tap will display a keyboard on demand in small screens, instead of taking up screen real estate or losing the keyboard button when it gets displayed behind the screen. Also, IME keyboards are fully supported in 2020 R1. In the web services area, there are new requests available for the HTTP client class, put and delete, and that adds to the existing get and post requests. The database bridge for MySQL now uses MySQL hints when generating the EDBI bridge program to optimize the SQL performance. As you can see in the table, it gives you a significant performance improvement. For all database bridge users, we've improved the start statement, so it'll execute fewer query instructions. The time improvement is shown here. C-Tree RTG has had some performance tuning in the past few versions, and this continues in 2020 R1. Now the performance hit that you get when adding logging to C-Tree is greatly reduced. Now logging is necessary when using replication or just for safety, so files can be rebuilt automatically in case of some unpredicted situation like losing power. We've also added the in-pool feature to C-Tree to give you performance gains there. The Jiffy file editor now keeps track of recently opened files, and it keeps track of the settings for each of those files as well. The new print preview thumbnails will help your users drill down to a specific page on those large PDF documents. And finally, our documentation has been updated. We've updated our format, replacing the WebWorks help with WebWorks Reverb 2.0 as our authoring format. The new responsive page design means you can view it on different size screens without having to scroll in both directions. So let's go look at some of those things now. So we're going to start in the IDE, and I want to show you the custom folding first. You've probably seen the folding for each section, the working storage, for instance, like this, the data, etc. But when you have sections of code like this, you might want to fold them and get them out of the way yourself. So if you highlight them with the line that you want to display, right-click in the folding area, there's now a new option to add custom folding. And you can see that you can also remove it and remove all of it, etc. So I'm going to add some custom folding in this program. There are 3 individual sections. So we'll add it there, and we'll add it there. And then I'm going to right-click in this area, and I'm going to collapse all code folding. And now it made it easier for me to look at each of these sections as I want them. So this program is part of a test in the test and coverage sample that's installed with isCOBOL. And there are 4 tests. This is test 2. You can see that it calls a program called arithmetic program. Test 1 just does some simple math. Test 3 takes an uppercase MyString and attempts to create a lowercase MyString. But because of this 2, it's only going to lower the first 2 letters. Therefore, this assert statement will fail, and this will be printed in your unit test report. And in test 4, my program doesn't exist, so when they call myprog, as usual, it will fail. Now, to run all 4 of these tests at the same time, we've created a test list file where we just simply list all of the test programs that we want to run. So I'm ready to run this. I'm going to come up to Run, and down below the Run and the Debug section is now a new section for code coverage. So I'll click on the coverage configurations, and under isCOBOL Unit Test, I'll right-click and create a new configuration, and we'll call it Test and Coverage. The project name is Test and Coverage. And for the program list, we're going to browse and select from the workspace. And here's my test list file with the 4 test programs in it. Working directory is output. And I will apply that, and then we can run it from here. So I'll run the COBOL coverage. And you can see that after it runs the 4 programs, we have 2 new tabs, Coverage and isUnit for unit testing. So let's look at the coverage first. We've missed some. See the red? Let's drill down a bit. Test 2 ran fine. Test 1 ran fine. So it looks like we're missing a little bit in Test 3 and Test 4, which, remember, both had problems. But we're also missing something in the arithmetic program, and we really want to test each part of that program. So if we expand that, we can see that the divide paragraph is not getting tested. So let's go to our Test 2 and take a look at it. And we have, remember, add, subtract, and multiply. That's right, we do not have divide. So the code coverage told us that our test program for the arithmetic program is not sufficient. We need to add the divide. So that's how the code coverage works. Now, Test 3 we expected to fail, and Test 4 we expected to fail, and that's why it's missing parts. So let's go over to the unit testing. We can see 1 and 2 were successful. 3 and 4 both had a problem. Looks like different problems because they're different colors. Test 3 has the test string manipulation error. Remember that error message? And Test 4, you can see here that the call is not found in my program. This is the one that you're used to seeing, but it prints it into the unit test report. So that's how code coverage and unit testing work. Now let's take a look at some of the GUI examples that I talked about earlier. And I'm going to run the isSamples program. Let's get this out of the way here. And under new features are all of the new things that I talked about in the 2020 R1. The first one is a table view. And you can see this is a tree view, but it has columns in it. And that's the table view part. We also, remember, have the scroll pane, and I'm going to tab through this. Now, there are fields out of sight, but when I tab, it'll scroll up automatically so that we can see those fields. In the thumbnails preview, you can see we can switch pages with the thumbnail. For the grid heading cursor color, as I click through here, you can see these highlighted row and column headings change to help me know where I am. And for the new mouse events on the control, we have a hyperlink label, and mousing over it and then clicking on it are both caught with that mouse event on the label. Now let's take a look at the debug port change. So I'm in our sample IS control set, and I'm going to run the server here. And then over here, I'll run client and debug. And you see that it starts in the first default port, and then my debugger comes up. Now let's try another debug session. And now it's come up, and you can see that it moved to the next debugger port in the series. Another one goes to the next. There's a lot of steps that you previously had to do to get this type of behavior, and now it's just automatic. And the last thing I want to show you is the documentation. This is our new documentation. You can search up here. Very responsive. If I change the size of this as if, say, I were viewing it on my smartphone, it's very responsive. And that's a quick view of what's new in 2020 R1. If you'd like to get a hold of us, there's information on the screen, or you can always email us at support@variant.com. Thank you.